Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive?
Always ready.
Good, because today we're diving headfirst into a situation that's unfolding as we speak. Multiple wildfires raging across LA County.
Yeah, it's a pretty intense situation right now.
Definitely. And we're bringing you the latest information based on all these breaking news reports, live updates, and firsthand accounts that are coming in.
It's changing by the minute, to be honest.
Absolutely. And we know you want to stay informed on something this big. I mean, we're talking over 1,000 structures already destroyed.
That's a whole lot of damage.
It's not just a number, it's families, displaced businesses, gone, an entire community impacted. And it all happened so fast. But before we get into the specifics of each fire, we need to understand what's driving this inferno.
Right, the fuel behind the flames.
Exactly.
Well, the Santa Ana winds are a huge factor.
Those notorious Santa Ana.
Yeah, they're notorious for a reason. These dry, powerful gusts blowing in from the desert are creating the perfect conditions for these fires to spread so rapidly.
I feel like we hear about Santa Ana winds all the time, but what makes them so dangerous? It's just wind, right?
It's not just wind, it's like a natural blowtorch.
Okay.
Imagine winds hitting up to 100 miles per hour, bone dry, sucking the moisture out of everything, turning vegetation into kindling.
Wow.
It's not just fanning the flames, it's actively pushing the fire, making it incredibly hard to contain.
So, like, someone took a hairdryer, cranked it to the max, and pointed it at a pile of leaves?
Pretty much.
Hey.
And the problem is made worse by the geography of LA County. You get those steep canyons, dense brush homes built right up against the wilderness, combine that with the extreme winds, and you've got a recipe for disaster.
A perfect storm, unfortunately. So these Santa Anas are fueling multiple fires. This map is covered in fire icons. It feels like the entire county is under siege.
It's definitely widespread.
How are firefighters even dealing with this?
It's a massive effort, to say the least, but let's break it down fire by fire, starting with the Palisades Fire. It ignited Tuesday morning and exploded to over 5,000 acres in just a few hours. It's burning in the Pacific Palisades area right along the Pacific Coast Highway.
That stretch of PCH with all the beautiful homes and views. Man, those images coming out of there are, I don't even know what to say.
Devastating is an understatement. Homes leveled, people fleeing on foot. A basketball team had to escape their school gym just ahead of the flames.
I saw that report. It's crazy. And the Real Inn, that famous seafood place on PCH,
Yeah.
gone. It's not just structures burning, it's memories, the history of this community. How many structures are we talking about here?
It's still being assessed, but it's looking like around 1,000 structures in that fire alone. It came dangerously close to the Getty Villa, but thankfully firefighters were able to save that landmark.
Talk about a close call. Okay, so that's the Palisades Fire. What about the Eaton Fire?
The Eaton Fire is burning further inland near Altadena and Pasadena. It's also being fueled by those relentless winds and has burned over 1,000 acres. We're seeing similar destruction there. Reports of a senior center being evacuated in the middle of the night, flames jumping freeways.
Yeah, I read a report about a long-term care facility catching fire too. Just chaos. And on top of all this, we've got the Hearst Fire, right?
Right, the Hearst Fire started Tuesday night in the Sylmar area. It's smaller than the other two, burning over 500 acres. But just as dangerous evacuations from a mobile home park in the middle of the night, people are calling it mayhem.
3 major fires raging at the same time. This has to be putting a huge strain on resources. The LAFD has called in all off-duty firefighters for the first time in 19 years. That really shows how serious this is.
Yeah, they're pulling out all the stops. We're talking thousands of firefighters on the ground, over 110 fire engines, battling not just the flames, but those treacherous winds.
And they had to ground the firefighting aircraft because it's too risky for them to be up there in those conditions. It's like they're fighting a monster they can't even see, let alone control.
It's a huge challenge. And it's not just the fires themselves. The impact goes way beyond the fire lines. Power outages, roads closed, schools are shut down, and the air quality is plummeting. This isn't just a one-day event. The effects are going to be felt for weeks, months, maybe even years.
We haven't even touched on the human cost of this disaster.
It's tragic. At least 2 deaths have been confirmed and numerous injuries reported, and those are just preliminary numbers. The situation is still developing, and we'll keep you updated as we learn more.
It's heartbreaking, and let's not forget about the first responders putting their lives on the line. One firefighter sustained a serious head injury battling these blazes. This is a full-blown emergency, and it sounds like everyone's recognizing that Governor Newsom declared a state of emergency and President Biden approved federal aid to help with the response.
A much-needed response.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's going to take everything we've got to contain these fires, support the victims, and start the long road to recovery. But even with all the manpower and aid, there's a sense of I don't know, helplessness almost. Like we're at the mercy of these winds.
Well, it's true that these fires are incredibly unpredictable, and the Santa Ana winds play a big role in that. But there are other factors at play that contribute to this chaos and the sheer scale of these events.
Okay, so if it's not just the winds, what else is making these fires so difficult to predict, let alone contain? I'm looking at these satellite images, and it's kind of wild how these fires just seem to jump around. Like they have a mind of their own.
Yeah, it's crazy.
One minute they're heading one way, the next they've hopped a freeway or a firebird. Like it's nothing.
Right. It's not that they're thinking, of course, but the combination of those intense Santa Anas, the terrain, all those factors create this really dynamic, unpredictable situation.
So break it down for me. What makes them so unpredictable, aside from those crazy winds? I mean,
Well, think about the terrain. Those steep canyons and hills, they create these like little microclimates, pockets where the wind can suddenly change direction, swirl around.
so it's not just the steady wind pushing the fire in one direction.
Nope, not at all. It's swirling, gusting, changing speed and direction constantly. It's like trying to predict where a feather will land in a hurricane.
Makes it pretty much impossible for firefighters to know where the fire is going to go next.
Exactly.
And then there's that thing you mentioned before, the ember factor. I'm still trying to wrap my head around that.
Right. Embers are these tiny pieces of burning material that can carried by the wind, sometimes for miles.
Miles.
Yeah, and they land on dry brush or even homes and start spot fires far away from the main blaze.
So even if you think you're a safe distance away.
You might not be.
Mm.
And these embers are almost impossible to track. It's like trying to contain a swarm of fireflies with a net.
Okay, so we've got unpredictable winds, tricky terrain, and flying embers. What else is feeding this beast? California has always had wildfires, but this feels different, bigger, more intense.
You're right to notice that shift. One major factor is the sheer amount of dry brush. We've been in a drought for years,
Yeah.
so all that vegetation is like a tinderbox, just waiting for a spark.
And then those Santa Anas come along.
Exactly. They just suck what little moisture is left right out of everything.
It's like someone prepped the whole state for a bonfire.
Grim, but accurate.
Mm-hmm.
So even a small spark, a stray cigarette, a malfunctioning piece of equipment can set off a massive fire. And once it gets going, it's nearly impossible to stop until it runs out of fuel or the wind dies down.
And the forecasts aren't looking too good, are they?
Not for the next few days, at least. Strong winds are expected to continue, which makes containment a nightmare. That's why it's so important for people to stay informed, heed those evacuation orders, and be ready for anything. I can't emphasize that enough.
I'm looking at these news reports, and it's just story after story of close calls, narrow escapes.
It really shows how resilient people are,
It does.
but it's also a stark reminder of how dangerous these fires are. Lives are being turned upside down, homes, lost entire communities reshaped. It's just heartbreaking.
I read about this family who had to flee their home in the middle of the night, only to find out their whole neighborhood was gone.
It's devastating. And it's not just homes. We're talking about businesses, schools, community centers, all reduced to ash. The economic and social impacts are going to be felt for a very long time.
And the thing is, this is happening more and more often. It's like every year the fires get worse, more frequent, more intense. It's not just a California problem either.
You're absolutely right. We're seeing these mega fires all over the world, from Australia to the Amazon. It's a global issue driven by climate change, and it's not going away anytime soon.
So what can we do about it? It feels so overwhelming.
That's a question that haunts a lot of us. There's no easy answer, no magic solution. But there are things we can do, both individually and as a society, to try to mitigate the risk and prevent these megafires from becoming the new normal.
Okay, let's dive into that. What can we do, you and me, at an individual level? What kind of things can actually make a difference?
Well, first and foremost, we need to get serious about preparedness. That means having an evacuation plan, knowing your routes, having an emergency kit ready to go. Food, water, medication, important documents all packed up and ready to grab at a moment's notice. And just as important, knowing the risks in your area. Don't wait till the flames are at your doorstep to figure out what to do.
You're preaching to the choir here. I've got my go bag, my family communication plan all set. But that's just one person. What kind of bigger systemic changes need to happen?
We need smarter forest management practices for one.
Like those controlled burns I've been hearing about.
Exactly. Controlled burns, thinning out overgrown areas, creating defensible spaces around homes and communities. We've got to stop treating fire like the enemy and start using it as a tool to manage our wildland areas.
What about all those homes built right up against the wilderness?
That's another critical point. We need to rethink building codes in fire-prone areas. using fire-resistant materials, creating wider buffer zones between structures and wildlands, mandating defensible space. It's not just about putting out fires, it's about preventing them from becoming catastrophic in the first place.
Okay, so better forest management, smarter building codes. What else? I mean, technology is advancing so quickly. Surely there are new tools we can use in this fight.
You're right. Investing in research and development is key. Think drones with infrared sensors to detect hot spots, better early warning systems that can predict fire behavior more accurately, more efficient firefighting equipment. Technology can play a huge role in lessening the impact of these fires.
All of that sounds promising, but let's be real here. The elephant in the room is climate change. As long as the planet keeps warming, these fires are only going to get worse. It feels like we're fighting a losing battle.
It's a daunting challenge, no question. But acknowledging the problem is the first step. We need to reduce our carbon emissions transition to renewable energy and protect our forests. They are our best defense against climate change. This isn't just about saving trees, it's about saving ourselves.
You know, going through all these reports, it's easy to get stuck in the doom and gloom, but there's also this thread of resilience that keeps coming up.
The human spirit.
Yeah, I'm talking about people losing their homes, their businesses, everything, and still finding ways to help each other. I read about a veterinarian who opened up her home to all these pets displaced by the fires, people setting up shelters, donating food and supplies.
It's inspiring, isn't it?
Yeah.
Even in the face of such devastation, that human connection, that sense of community shines through. Organizations like World Central Kitchen are on the ground providing meals to first responders and evacuees. Volunteers are showing up by the hundreds.
It's a good reminder that even in the darkest times, there's always hope, always kindness. That even amidst the ashes, we can rebuild, we can support each other, we can find a way forward. But it can't just be about rebuilding the same way in the same places, can it?
You're getting at a crucial point. We can't just keep repeating the same mistakes, expecting different results. This is a wake-up call.
Yeah.
A chance to really reevaluate our relationship with nature, with fire itself. We've tried to suppress fire, control it, and in doing so, we've created the conditions for these megafires to thrive.
So what's the alternative? Let the fires burn unchecked.
Not exactly. It's about finding a balance. Embracing controlled burns, recognizing that fire is a natural part of the ecosystem, learning to live with it in a way that's both safe and sustainable.
So this isn't just about putting out the fires. It's about rethinking our entire approach to wildfire management, to land use, to our very relationship with nature.
It's a paradigm shift, and it's not going to be easy, but it's necessary because the old way clearly isn't working.
It's a lot to take in, to be honest. The scale of this event, the human cost, the long road ahead. But I feel like we're just scratching the surface here. There's so much more to unpack, so many more angles to explore.
There is. And in the next part of our deep dive, we'll delve into some of the emerging research on wildfire behavior, the latest innovations in firefighting technology, and the complex social and economic challenges of rebuilding after a disaster of this magnitude.
Okay, we're going to take a quick pause to gather our thoughts, but stick with us. We'll be right back to continue our deep dive into the LA wildfires. All right, we're back. Still with us. Hope so, because things are about to get really interesting. We've talked about the immediate impact of these fires, the heroic work of the firefighters, the devastating losses, and even those crazy Santa Ana winds. But now let's zoom out a bit, look at the bigger picture. What can we actually learn from all this? What are the long-term effects of these mega fires?
That's the big question, isn't it? And it's one we're going to be wrestling with for years to come. Because the truth is, these fires are a symptom of a much larger problem, one that's not going to disappear overnight.
Climate change. We all knew it was coming.
It's the elephant in the room, and it's absolutely fueling these increasingly intense wildfires.
Yeah.
As temperatures rise, droughts get worse, and all that vegetation becomes even more flammable. It's a vicious cycle.
Yeah, it feels like we're constantly playing catch-up, reacting to the latest disaster instead of getting ahead of the curve.
That's a good point. We've been so focused on suppressing fires for so long that we've forgotten how important they are for healthy ecosystems. And now we're seeing the consequences.
So what's the solution? How do we break this cycle?
It's going to take a multifaceted approach. We need to reduce carbon emissions, transition to renewable energy, and protect our forests. They're our best defense against climate change. But we also need to rethink how we manage wildfires.
We talked about this a bit earlier, but I want to dig a little deeper. What does that actually look like?
Well, for starters, we need to embrace controlled burns.
Okay.
I know it sounds counterintuitive, but using fire as a tool can actually help prevent those massive out-of-control wildfires.
Controlled burns, you mean intentionally setting fires. Isn't that kind of risky?
There's always some risk, but when done right, controlled burns can help clear out the underbrush, reduce the amount of fuel, and create healthier forests that are less likely to go up in flames. It's about working with nature, not against it.
Makes sense, I guess. But controlled burns alone won't solve the problem, right?
No, they're just one piece of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
We also need to rethink how we build in fire-prone areas. Using fire-resistant materials, creating defensible space around homes and communities, being smart about development.
So it's not just about putting out fires, it's about urban planning,
Yeah.
community design, even individual choices homeowners make.
Exactly. It's a collective effort,
Yeah.
and it's about changing our mindset. We need to start seeing ourselves as part of nature, not separate from it. Because at the end of the day, what we do to the environment, we do to ourselves.
You know, something that really struck me going through all these reports was how resilient people are. Even in the face of such devastation, they come together, they help each other, they rebuild.
It's incredible, isn't it? The power of community human connection. You see it time and time again after disasters. People stepping up, offering support, sharing resources, rebuilding together.
It gives me hope. It reminds me that even in the darkest times, there's light, there's kindness, there's this belief in a better future. But rebuilding isn't just about bricks and mortar, is it? It's about healing, dealing with trauma, coming to terms with loss.
Absolutely. And that takes time. It's about supporting each other, providing mental health resources, fostering a sense of community and belonging. Rebuilding isn't just about structures. It's about restoring lives, rebuilding hope.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left with so many emotions. Sadness, anger, fear about what the future holds, but also this glimmer of hope, this sense that we can do better, we have to do better.
I feel that too. It's a critical moment, a time for reflection, but it's also a time for opportunity. We have the knowledge, we have the technology, and we have the human capacity to make a real difference.
It's not going to be easy. There will be setbacks, challenges, but we can't give up. We owe it to ourselves, to future generations, to this planet we call home.
Well said. We need to turn this energy, this collective will, into action. And that starts with staying informed, having these conversations, and holding our leaders accountable.
This isn't just about putting out fires, it's about preventing them. It's about creating a more resilient, more sustainable future for everyone. And that's a future worth fighting for.
I couldn't agree more. So to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Remember, the conversation doesn't end here. Stay curious, stay engaged, and stay hopeful, because ultimately, the future is in our hands.